Hello everyone, welcome back to video number 6 in this Introduction to Modeling with Cinema 4D series. I am Carlo Diego, your host, and in this video we're going to cover one of my favorite things inside of cinema, and that's working with text. I was introduced to Cinema 4D after many years of using Maya, mainly because of the workflow and how easy it was to integrate your Cinema 4D files and projects with After Effects or Photoshop. And working with text is really one of my favorite things to do inside of cinema. It's one of the things that helped me kind of learn to play around with all the tools and settings. So two different ways of doing text inside of cinema, both very fluid and very easy to wrap your head around. One of them being MoText. If you downloaded a demo from the Maxon website, then chances are you have the MoText module. However, if you're a Creative Cloud subscriber, you don't have MoText, but what you do have is the spline menu, and inside of that there is a text object. So really easily we can bring in text, and we have most of the settings that one would expect inside of text. You have your font selection, you have bold, regular, italic, the type of text that you have. You can align left, middle, or right. You can change the height of the text, or the size essentially. You can change the horizontal spacing or tracking of the text itself. You can, if you have more than one line of text, you can change the vertical spacing of said text, very similar to line height. What you don't have, and it's unfortunate, is kerning. We are unable to, at this point, kern text inside of Cinema 4D. Right now we're in Cinema 4D version R14. R15 might have kerning tools. I'm not 100% sure. I could have sworn that I read that, but I'm not 100% on that. What there are some third-party plugins that you can use. The one that comes to mind is called Kernimator, and Kernimator allows you to have up to 26 letters inside of the Kernimator object, which you can kern individually. So we're not really going to go into third-party plugins, but what we are going to do is just use the text tool as it is to the best of our ability. Now, another option you have, if you absolutely have to kern your text, is to create your text inside of Illustrator and then save and export that, or save and import that into Cinema 4D. If you don't remember exactly how to do so, just go back a couple of videos and go through that process again of saving text or saving Illustrator files for Cinema 4D. So for this example, we're going to go ahead and type in a word here, and let's just do Skillshare. And I'm going to go ahead and change my font to a free font, actually, Malo. And I'm going to take my text object and I'm going to throw it inside of an Extrude NURB. The Extrude NURB is going to automatically create 3D geometry out of our text. This is very similar to what we saw with the Sweep NURB, in that it's taking an outline of something and creating 3D geometry with it, but it's just doing it in one plane. So if we go into the object settings of the Extrude NURBs, we can see that we can change the depth of the text, and I'm just going to go ahead with a 200. And we could, if we wanted to, change the position in X or Y, but we're not going to do that for this example. We're just going to leave it at 200. And what I do want to do is that we've talked about before is that if you do a quick render on this, we've got very sharp edges here. And we don't want those sharp edges pretty much ever in a 3D object. So we're going to turn on fillet cap. We're going to change the steps to 3. We're going to change the radius to 2. And we'll do the same for the back. And we'll leave it at that. If we do a quick render now, you'll see that the edges catch light a little bit better than it did before. Now there's different types of fillet when it comes to using the extrude object or even MoText, and you can change it from linear to convex or concave, circle, one step, two step, engraved. We're actually going to do half circle because I kind of like the way that looks with this font. And what we can start doing, and what'll become very simple to control and see with text with that half circle fillet there, is that let's say we wanted to apply two different colors to this text and we wanted the outline to be, let's say, white, and let's just make this all the way white. Leave the specular on. Let's open up the second one and let's get some kind of, maybe a blue, kind of like that other teal. There we go. So let's apply both of these to the text. Now, order matters. So the last one that you apply is the one that you see. If we do a quick render, all blue. If we switch the order and move white over to the other side, now we see white. But let's say we wanted this outline to be white and the rest of it to be blue. So in the white tag texture, we have selection. And if we go ahead and just type R1, hit return, or tab, excuse me, then you'll see that it's now only being applied to that rim. We can do the same thing, add another white, and do the same for the back, but since we can't see it, I'm not going to stress that too much. So I'm going to leave it just like this, because now I have my blue text with the white outline, which I think looks pretty cool. Now, one of the other things that you could do is change it to C1, and what that would do is apply it to cap number 1, which is the one facing the camera. So now we have a white cap with the rest of the body being blue. But I kind of like the white highlight, so we're going to leave it like that. Now I'm going to introduce a plane into the scene, and I'm going to change the orientation to +Z, and I'm going to change the width to 2000 and the height to 1000. So this is just going to serve as my background, and I'm going to go ahead and change views and just push it back so that it sits behind the scene. I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of lights to my scene, which we haven't really done before, but let's just go ahead and bring a light. And we can bring it up above, overhead, do a quick render. And now we're starting to see some different lighting that we didn't have before. I want to add a texture to this background because right now it just feels a little too plain. So let's double click in the material editor and open up a new color. I'll turn off specular, and I'm going to go into color, and I'm going to open up texture and add a gradient. If you click on the gradient and you go into the type, you can go down to 2D circular, and that gives you a circular gradient. Right-clicking on this gradient will allow us to invert the knots, and now we have a vignette kind of effect. Let's double-click on that, and let's add a color to our background. Do like a reddish orange, maybe a blue. Kind of like this grayish blue here. Let's do that and close it. And instead of black, I'm going to take my loop here, select that, and just darken it. So now it's not so harsh. Close that, throw that texture onto the background, and now quick render, and there we go. So that's great. Now let's add a couple of lights to the scene. We've got the one already. I want to drop the intensity to 75, and I want to add shadows, soft shadows to be exact. And very few lights in the real world are 100% white, so I want to add a little bit of texture, a little bit of color to these lights. So let's go ahead and just make one that's a light blue. And I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so I can see the position of these lights. I'm going to put one over here. I'm going to hold down Command, click and drag to make a copy of that, and I'm going to make this one just a little bit yellowish. So okay, now I've got my lights, I've got my skill share, and I've got my background. I'm going to zoom out just so that it's within these bounds. Before we go further, let's go into our render settings really quick. So, okay, if we go down the list, output allows us to change the width and height of the file itself. So I want to do 1280 by 720. And everything else can pretty much stay the way it is. I can lock it. You can even go into the custom settings and find presets for very popular sizes. We can go into save and tell Cinema 4D where it is we want it to save. So let's just call it SK plate. Save that. You can choose to have an alpha channel if you'd like. If you were going to composite this inside of After Effects or Photoshop, you'd probably want to use an alpha channel and then create your background and everything else, your environment inside of Cinema 4D. Or excuse me, inside of Photoshop or After Effects. We're going to skip multipass because we're not going to be using multipasses. But anti-aliasing, we want to change it from geometry to best. And this is going to create a sharper image in the end. So minimum level, I'm going to change that to 2x2. Maximum level, I'm going to leave it at 4x4. But if you wanted a much sharper image, 8x8, 16x16 would be the way to go. Just keep in mind that the higher up you go with these numbers, the longer your render is going to take. And for the purpose of this video, I don't want to sit here and watch it render for so long. Inside of the options, once you start introducing lights of your own, you want to make sure to go in here and turn off default light. Almost almost any time that you add lights, you'll want to change or turn off default light. So let's just go ahead and do that. Another thing that we want to add is go into Effect, and we want to add ambient occlusion. Occlusion is a little vague, and if you've never worked in 3D or if you're not really familiar with lighting and physics, then you've probably never really heard the term. But what ambient occlusion does is that it attempts to approximate the way that light is radiated in real life. So basically, if something is non-reflective, even though it's non-reflective, it still radiates light a certain way. So ambient occlusion allows you to kind of cheat that inside of 3D space. So I'm going to go ahead and change this maximum ray length to 150, and I'm going to change the accuracy to 75%. Now, changing those two will make my render take a little longer, but what I'll do is I'll just pause the video while it renders and then come back so we can see the effects. I'm going to go ahead and close that, and I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of more planes. Now, these planes are going to serve as my light boxes, my fake light boxes, if you will. I'm going to create one more texture here. I'm going to turn off color, turn off specular, go to luminance, and turn on luminance. I'm going to change the luminance settings to 250, and I'm going to apply this to this new plane. Now, this is kind of like a bounce card or a softbox, if you will. Now, you could spend a lot of time building these. What I would recommend is checking out some light kits that you could purchase on the internet. You can also just make these yourself. But for starters, this is a really good way of setting up some objects that can be reflected off your objects. So let's just make a couple of these cards. I'm going to rotate this one. And then I'm just going to kind of put it in position. I want this one to kind of fill the bottom here a little bit better. Okay, so let's zoom back into our text. Now, we don't want these cards to be seen by the camera, so we can either move them out of the way, or we can add a compositing tag so that they don't show up. They're not seen by the camera, actually. So now the camera doesn't see them. If we do a quick render, you see that it's really dark in here. So let's go ahead and stop that render. Let's go to our two lights. Let's bump these back up a little bit to 85. And that'll brighten it up a little bit more. I want to add one more light, and this is just going to be an area light. This is just going to be like a fill, if you will. And I'm going to increase the size of it, bring it all the way out, maybe up, and just rotate it a bit. And you could set things up pretty much any way you'd like. I am by no means an expert in studio lighting, so if you've taken photography, if you've taken a studio class, you could probably do a much better job than I am in this. But I want to go into my blue and my white color, the colors for my text, and I want to turn on reflection. I also want to go into reflection, and I want to add some Fresnel, and I want to drop the brightness and the mix strength. And I'll do the same to the blue. Add reflection, add Fresnel, drop those as well. And now I'm going to pause this video, do a quick render, and come right back. And here is our render from the setup that we just created. Now the shadow is maybe a bit exaggerated here, but it's nice to see it. And if you look really closely, you could start seeing where some of the bounce cards are. Here you can kind of see the white bounce card. Here you can kind of see it. And they really help when it comes to having reflective objects in a scene. Try to really like recreate an environment so that there's more to it than just a basic reflection being turned on and off. So I'm going to leave this video here, and I want you guys to really experiment with this technique using text, using lights. You can also add a camera if you want. And this way, when you zoom into the text, you can come up here to the camera, turn this on, and then if you turn it off, you go right back to where you were. So actually, let's turn it on. Let's record this position here. I'm going to change the focal length. I'm going to actually decrease it and zoom in a bit. And I'm going to make my plane, my background plane, just a little taller. And I'm going to pause. So even though we just kind of introduced the camera and just threw it in there to kind of lock it in place, I just wanted to do a really quick introduction of the camera. We're going to explore using the camera a little bit more in the next video when we start setting up a scene. We're going to take the table and some of the other objects that we've created. We're going to set up the camera, and I'm going to show you how to recreate depth of field, shallow depth of field, inside of Cinema 4D for a really nice render where only portions of it are in focus and the rest is somewhat blurred. So I'm going to leave you here. I'm going to encourage that you experiment with this technique, and I'll see you all in the next video. Thanks. Bye.